Hey, I'm Chris Zepp from Make Everything, and today I'm going to show you how to take a single sheet of plywood and turn it into this really useful scrap bin, and I'm only going to use a couple of basic tools. Check it out. Okay, so before we get started, I just want to talk a little bit about the plans. So this is laid out on a 4 foot by 8 foot sheet of 3/4 inch material. That's how everything's dimensioned. And you're going to want to start your cuts in alphabetical order. So you're going to want to start at A, B, C, D, and so on. And the reason that you're going to do that is because I didn't account for any blade kerf. I didn't really know what people were going to be cutting this with. Honestly, you could cut this with a handsaw, but obviously it's going to change the dimensions. It won't affect anything. The only thing it's going to affect is it's going to make the actual bottom of the unit slightly smaller, but it really shouldn't affect the design at all. Every lettered part on here corresponds to a letter on the rendering of what the entire thing looks like, and this is basically your assembly instructions, obviously along with the video. So I'm going to be using a track saw for this. You could easily use a regular circular saw with a guide piece of material. You could make yourself one of those tracks. You could do this with a jigsaw. You could do it on the table saw. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but for me, I'm going to use the track saw. It'll be the fastest and easiest way for me, and then just some glue and some screws. So let's get right into building this, and again, these plans are available in the link below. Okay, so like I said, I didn't compensate for the kerf of the blade when I made this drawing. So the last dimension, if you're cutting, as I said, from the sides down to the bottom, you're not going to be left with 21 full inches. In my case, I'm left with 20 and 7/8. That's fine because the last piece is the bottom of the entire unit. So as long as these dimensions are relatively true, you're going to come up with totally an okay amount of parts, and everything's going to work out fine. So now that we did our cross cuts, let's do the rest of the cuts to break down these pieces. So here are my two sides. Here's my front and my back. Here I've got my mid and my low dividers, and then this piece is going to wind up being another mid divider and some blocking that we're going to use later on. And here's my bottom, and then this piece is going to be cut up into some more parts for the little sections that we're going to make later. Now, whenever I'm using a track saw to make a small rip like this, I just use a piece of the same thickness material to hold on to the track. So here's my midsection divider, and this we're going to hold on to. Here's a divider. Here's another divider. Just making sure those are the same size. And this is another block that we're going to use. So the only piece left to cut is to cut this into 3-inch pieces. Now you could easily cut this with the skill saw, but I have a miter saw, so I am going to cut this with a miter saw. If you don't have a miter saw, you could use your skill saw, or you could just use a hand saw. This is kind of a small piece to do with the track saw. Okay, I've got all my pieces cut. Now we can start assembling. The way that I'm gonna begin my assembly is by, I'm gonna build the whole box up, and then I'm gonna put the bottom on it after. This is the bottom. I'm gonna push this off to the side for now. Here's my middle divider. Here's my low divider. Here's the front, and here's the back. And we're gonna start by putting the sides on it. I'm gonna just assemble this with screws and glue. You really don't need much else. You can use brad nails if you want. You could use clamps, but screws and glue have worked well for me, and in the end, it's really just a scrap cart. So like the plan shows, there's no divider in the back section, but I still want to have that 5-inch offset. So I'm going to use my front dividers as a spacer, and I'm going to just lay these in here and put my sheet on top of that. I'm just checking before I add my glue that this is going to be the right size. It's also important to make sure you get your spacers out. The next section has a divider right in the middle. So I'm going to measure out from either side to the center, 14 1/4. And then here's my divider. Now, this divider is going to sit up high. So as you saw on the plan, there is a slice cut that you can make in this. So I want to cut this diagonal just because it'll kind of give it a little bit better of a look. This angle will match the angle on the side panels here. So I'm just going to do this on the miter saw as well, but again, you could easily do this with a hand saw. I don't necessarily know what this angle is, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn my miter saw, and I'm just going to bring my blade down, and I'm going to just sort of make it so that the blade lines up with the line. I happen to have a shadow line on my saw, which you can watch a tutorial of me making that, link below. But this will do. So with this piece cut, I'm not going to be able to get in from the back and really put in screws. I mean, I could put in one from the bottom, but we don't need to worry about that. We can actually use this as a spacer, put the screws in from the top, and then glue it into place. So I've got my next piece here. This is going to be the next divider, and I want this piece to be centered in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to measure and make some marks, and then I can screw this in from the front and then lay this in there with some glue to accommodate where I don't have any screws. Speed square is helpful when building something like this. I'm just sort of guesstimating a space there. I'm using my lines that I drew with my speed square on the back side. Just put one screw in here. Pretty good. And now that I have one, I can use the second one. Use the speed square to put in the second screw. Just make sure it's nice and square, and throw a second screw in from the bottom. I can add a screw in the middle if I want, and just use a speed square to get up to that. So now, to make up for not being able to get the screw in there, I'm just going to throw some glue on this and flip it over and lay it onto the box. To make sure it's square, you can use these and put them in there. It's a little out of square. And now I can screw in from the side here. and use the speed square as a little reference here. So these two pieces are for here, for the front section, and we're going to do the same thing with the front. We're going to space these evenly, and we're just going to lay it on the top. So the way these lay out here, if you go from the inside of the first arm over here, you can go 9 inches. You go from the inside over here and go 9 inches. You're going to be left with almost exactly 9 inches in the center. It really depends on the thickness of your plywood. This is a little bit undersized from 3/4, so I'm left with 9 1/16. But so 9 inches from either side will get you basically 3 even cubes. Now I'm not gluing the sides yet. Now that I got those screwed in, I can put some glue on these two surfaces and on here. So the main structure here is done. Now I want to put the bottom on. An easy way to put the bottom on is to actually flip it on its face, because what we're going to do here is we're going to make the bottom sit flush with the front, but we want it to stick out on the sides and on the back. We're just going to check it by eye. And then when you're done, you should wind up with 2.5 inches on either side. So now what I'm going to do is, I have this pressed up against there. I'm applying a little bit of pressure to it. I'm going to take some glue and I'm just going to put it on the bottom surfaces, and then I'm going to flip this up and drive some screws into it. And have a full bottle of glue if you're going to build yourself one of these. One screw will hold it up, and then you can measure in. Here's a good trick. Put your tape measure on here and then lock your tape measure at that distance, and then you can flip your tape measure over on the other side and get a quick little mark for where the edge of your board is. The same thing on the bottom. Put our tape measure tight, lock it up. Now I'm going to add some casters to mine, but you really could just have this sitting on the floor. The idea of having a wooden bottom is that if you have a concrete floor, you don't want any moisture to suck up from the concrete into the bottom of your wood. So at least if you have something in between the ends of your boards and the floor, this will help your pieces from getting kind of messed up. So I'm going to throw some casters on there though. Now I'm going to position the caster sort of inside. I don't really want all the weight to hang on this hinge out here. So I'm going to position the caster sort of centered on the corner. So now the cart is essentially done, but I thought it'd be cool to try and use all the extra material that we had from when we cut up the sheet of plywood. So here's what we're left with. You'll remember I cut up these little blocks on the miter saw. Here's the offcut from that tapered centered section, and these are two pieces that I have labeled as blocks. So a buddy of mine, Luke D'Angelo from Man-Made, Massachusetts, he made one of these, and what he did was he put some dowel storage on the side. So I thought, why not kind of change up the design a little bit and utilize these small pieces to do some rod or dowel storage on the side. So let's work that up real quick. So I'm gonna use these small blocks, and the way that it works out is you wind up with 8 of these. So we're gonna stack them like this, and we're gonna nail this on there, and it's gonna give us our little carriers for, say, dowels or other really thin material that might want to kind of fall over. And this is sort of a random height. I'm just gonna pick 19 inches and put the dowel, the other section of the dowel thing there. Here I'm switching to 1 1/4 screws because I have to go right into the plywood right here, and I don't want to pop through. All right, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you learned something. If you have any questions, leave me a comment down below. I really enjoyed this project. I really enjoyed building this. I really enjoyed designing it, really trying to get the most out of that single sheet of plywood. We were only left with these 2 little scraps. If you have an idea of what we could do with these to incorporate them into the design, please leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you. This is sort of my entry for the Rockler Plywood Challenge. While it's not a beautiful piece of furniture, and I've seen some of the other entries and they're all amazing, I thought that I would push myself to make something that was a little more functional, something that I actually needed. I desperately needed a scrap cart. I probably need to make a second one of these because I have so much junk. But anyway, it was a great project. It was a lot of fun. The plans for this, which are that sheet with all the cuts on it for a 4x8 sheet, are going to be in a link below. They'll be available on my website for free. I hope a lot of people build these. If you make one, let me know. Tag me on Instagram and use the hashtag #OneSheetScrapCart so that I can see the stuff that you've made and see, you know, the innovations that you put to this. And yeah, so again, thanks so much. Subscribe to my channel, like this video if you enjoyed it, share it with friends, and I hope to see you on the next video. All right, thanks so much.